Day program. We're here today to honor our veterans and their achievements, their courage and their dedication, and to say thank you for their sacrifices. The service members we honor today came from all walks of life, but they shared several fundamental qualities. They possessed courage, pride, determination, selflessness, and dedication to duty and integrity. Let us never forget what each of them sacrificed for this country and for every one of us. Would our ushers please come forward? Mr. Noah Tangulonis of the Tilton Police Explorer and Cadet Airman First Class Bailey Barrington of the Civil Air Patrol.
Good evening or good morning. Entering first as one of our very first veterans is Mr. Ken Osgood. He served in the Navy Coast Guard Auxiliary for 25 years in the Amphibious Division from 1944 to 1950. He's escorted by Andrew Morris. Who served in the United States Marine Corps, 4th Marine Division from 1942 to 1945, escorted by Xavier Dutilly. Our next veteran is Mr. Joe Evans, Sergeant in the United States Marine Corps in Vietnam from 1968 to 1969. 1st Armored Amphibian Company, 11th Marine Regiment, 1st Marine Division, escorted by Dylan Russell. The next veteran is Mr. Dalton Avery, who served in the U.S. Army from 1969 to 1972, escorted by Alexis Deaton and Meredith and Jordan Saborn. Our next veteran is Mr. Ernest Holtzman. He served in the Army 82nd Airborne Division from 1968 to 1961, escorted by Anna and Abby Harvey and Maisie Anderson. Our next veteran is Mr. James Fadden Sr., who served in the Navy on the USS Richard Krause from 1954 to 1958, escorted by Skylee Fadden. Our next veteran is Mr. Conrad DeJard, who served in the Navy. He's escorted by Blake Tower. Our next veteran is Mr. Robert Banfield Sr., who served in the United States Air Force from 1963 to 1967, escorted by Devin and John Banfield. Next, we have Mr. Peter Langmaid, who served in the Air Force 3rd Tactical Fighter Wing in Vietnam from 1966 to 1970, escorted by Nicole Fucci. Next, we have Sandra Raniker, who served in the Army 501st Division from 1980 to 1984. And Cameron Raniker and Alexis Collingham are working in with her, but also they're carrying photos and representing Mr. Ernest Raniker, who served in the Army, Mr. Richard Collingham, who served in the Marines, and Mr. Rod Black, who served in the United States Air Force. Next, we have Ryan Warren Jr., who served in the Army 509th Airborne Division in Wiesbaden, Germany from 1968 to 1970. Who's being escorted by Hannah Hoover. Next, we have Mr. Robert McAfee, who served in the Coast Guard from 1983 to 1991, being escorted by Paige McAfee. Next, we have Mr. Lynn Doloff, who served in the United States Air Force from 1984 to 1990, being escorted by Kason Burrows. The United States Navy, CTF Division 115 from 1958 to 1972, escorted by Gavin Tebow. Next, Mr. Patrick Walsh, who served in the Air Force Nuclear Weapons Specialist from 1975 to 1998, escorted by Brady Morris. Mr. Alan Ward, who served in the Army Special Operations from 1962 to 1986, escorted by Grant and Liam Clark. We have our very own Bill Fraser, who served in the United States Navy from 1973 to 1977, escorted by Kai Good. We welcome Darrell Cathers, who served in the United States Army from 1964 to 1966, being escorted by Spencer Arpin and Isabel Smith. Next, we have Mr. James Manning, who served in the Army, the 1st Battle Group 16th Infantry from 1959 to 1962, escorted by Cameron and Liam Manning. Next, we have Mr. Steve Welch, who served in the Marines from 1973 to 1976, escorted by Delana Welch. We welcome Mr. Bill Jolly, who served in the Navy from 1986 to 1992 as an Army and is now in the Army National Guard as of 1992, and he is escorted by Sarah Jolly. Next, we have Mr. Luigi Deliciotis, who served in the United States Navy from 1990 to 1994, and he is escorted by Thomas Deliciotis. Who served in the United States Air Force Green Chief KC-97 tanker from February of 1962 to 1968, and he is escorted by Patrick Duncan. Next, we have Mr. Mike Dodelock, who served in the Army 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Infantry Divisions from 1978 to 1998. And Mr. Casey Drew, United States Air Force Air National Guard from 2001 to the present, and they are both being escorted by Michael Drew. Marines from 1995 to 1999, escorted by Sienna and McKenna Mack. Served in the United States Army at the Fire Direction Center Division from 1981 to 1983, escorted by Abby Sawyer. Mr. Daniel Tenniston, who served in the Army from 1964 to 1967 as the 577th Engineer Battalion in Vietnam in 1966 and 1967, escorted by Marjorie Tenniston. Next, we have Mr. Charles Harrington, who served in the Army in the 4th RCT Regimental Combat Team from 1956 to 1958, escorted by Andrew and Brandon Harrington. We have Mr. Richard Murray, who served in the Marine Corps from 1969 to 1971, escorted by Brody Murray. We welcome Ms. Gloria Kimball, who served in the United States Army as a dental assistant from 1962 to 1967, escorted by Kirsten Fallon. David Bradley, who served in the Army from 1962 to 1982. He is escorted by Aurora Isigo. Our next veteran is Mr. Paul Rand, who served in the United States Navy on the Air USS Lexington from 1971 to 1975 in Vietnam, and he is escorted by Vienna Rand, and his grandson Cole will be one of our counselors. Who served served in the Army from 1983 to 1986, and he is being escorted by Viviana Goodfood. Our next veteran is Brendan Ingalls, and Amy Brooks will be carrying the photo of him. He is currently serving in the Army 1st Armored Division, and starting in 2013 to the present, Mr. Brendan Ingalls. Represented by a photo of their great-grandfather, Mr. Philip T. McMorran, Airman First Class, United States Air Force, from 1952 to 1956, and his photo is being carried by Olivia, Shanna, and Bryn Drapo. Next, we have Mr. Adam Rich and Lindsay Rich, who are serving in the Army as of the 2006 to the present, and they are being escorted by Emily Rich. Next, we have Mr. Victor Aldrich, who served in the Army from 1945 to 1947, being escorted by Allie Rakita. Who served in the United States Army on the 33rd Seagull Battalion in the U.S. Army, Alaska from 1970 to 1972, escorted by Skylar Laval. Next, we have Mr. Richard Gilpatrick, who served in the Marine Corps from 1964 to 1970, escorted by Lexi Harrington. Senior, who served in the Navy from 1959 to 1963, being escorted by his grandchildren, Bree and Maddie Chase. We also have Mr. Errol Chase Jr., who served in the Air Force from 1985 to 1989. He's also walking for his brother Mark Chase, who's in the Coast Guard, and in loving memory of Donald O'Rourke, Air Force, and Raymond O'Rourke, Army, and Lester Bradley, Marines, being escorted by Colby and Jack. Howard Beckwith, who served in the Army Air Corps from 1943 to 1946. He is a World War II veteran, and he is being escorted by Luigina Baca. Next, we have Mr. Ronald Christensen, who served in the Army from 1980 to 1992, who is being escorted by Malachi Ritzman.
Flags by the Boy Scouts. Presentation of colors by Mr. John Rich, Eagle Scout.
This candle is reminiscent of the light of hope, which lives in our hearts to illuminate their way home, away from their captors to open arms of a grateful nation.
Would Miss Abby Sawyer and Miss Caitlin Peck come up?
Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Could you all be seated, please? Would Mr. Tim Holden and Mr. Wyatt Safford come forward? They're going to share the story behind the Star Spangled Banner.
The following is an excerpt from an article by Kate Lineberry at Smithsonian.com entitled "The Story Behind the Star Spangled Banner: How the Flag That Flew Proudly Over Fort McHenry Inspired an Anthem." On a rainy September 13, 1814, British warships sent a downpour of shells and rockets onto Fort McHenry in Baltimore Harbor, relentlessly pounding the American fort for 24 hours. The bombardment, known as the Battle of Baltimore, came only weeks after the British had attacked Washington, D.C., burning the Capitol, the Treasury, and the President's House. It was another chapter in the ongoing War of 1812. A week earlier, Francis Scott Key, a 35-year-old American lawyer, had boarded the flagship of the British fleet on the Chesapeake Bay in hopes of persuading the British to release a friend who had recently been arrested. Key's tactics were successful, but because he and his companions had gained knowledge of the impending attack on Baltimore, the British did not let them go. They allowed the Americans to return to their own vessel, but continued guarding them. Under their scrutiny, Key watched on September 13th as the barrage of Fort McHenry began 8 miles away. It seemed as though Mother Earth had opened and was vomiting shot and shell in a sheet of fire and brimstone, Key wrote later. But then darkness surrounded him. Key saw only red erupting in the night sky. Given the scale of the attack, he was certain the British would win. The hours passed slowly, but in the clearing smoke of the dawn's early light, on September 14th, he saw the American flag, not the British Union Jack, flying over the fort, announcing an American victory. He put his thoughts on paper while still on board of the ship. His brother-in-law, commander of a militia at Fort McHenry, read Key's work and had it distributed under the name of Defense of Fort McHenry. The poem was printed in newspapers and eventually set to the music of a popular English tune by composer John Stafford Smith. The Baltimore Patriot newspaper soon printed it, and within weeks, Key's poem, now called The Star Spangled Banner, appeared in print across the country. immortalizing his words and forever naming the flag it celebrates. Years later, in 1931, it was officially adopted as our national anthem, though to this day, many people do not realize that there are actually 4 verses to this great song.
Those are as true today as they were then. Throughout this nation's history, America's soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen have bravely answered the call to defend our freedom, to aid our friends and allies, and to turn back aggressors. We can never fully repay our debt of gratitude to the Americans who died in battle. We can, however, recognize and thank the millions of veterans still living today. Today, it is our privilege to say thank you to all of the American veterans. We celebrate America's veterans for keeping this nation the land of the free and the home of the brave. In celebration of Veterans Day and in honor of the 200th anniversary of this great song, we ask that you stand if you are able as we perform all 4 verses of the Star-Spangled Banner.
made many sacrifices like leaving your loved ones behind. You also went into unknown territories and faced enemies, defended freedom, and saved many lives. There have been many obstacles that you may have overcome throughout the years, and I honor and appreciate that. Sincerely, Jack Chase.
This letter was by Lizzie Drew, and I'm going to read it for her. Dear veterans, thank you for serving our country and sacrificing your lives for our safety and freedom. Thank you for protecting our country. Even if you didn't go to war, you still helped and did your best. Also, thank you for making personal sacrifices, such as leaving your family to go to other places like boot camp, trainings, or deployment. Thank you for doing your best. I have two special veterans in my life. They are my dad and Papa. My dad works on planes and fixes them for the U.S. Air Force. When I was little, my dad, mom, and brother had to move to Arizona. My mom and brother moved there so my dad could learn about planes. My papa was in the U.S. Army, so my papa and my grandma had to move many different places. I know it was hard moving for my family, and they missed their friends and family. They are only one example of the many veteran families that make these sacrifices. That's why we honor you and thank you for your service. Sincerely, Lizzie Drew.
Thank you, veterans. You fought for our country. You are daring and determined. You are active, alert, and you are wise. You fought for freedom. You fought to defeat tyranny. You fought to help. You are fearless. You fought for us, Americans, and you should hold the American flag proud. You worked in submarines and in air, whether you were in the war or not. You are amazing. You sacrificed your lives for freedom. You are heroes. Veteran Robinson.
Stand
guess I should have paid attention to Mrs. Grace in my prize speaking class, but here goes. This is entitled The Best on Earth, Active Day Tribute by Joanna Dukes. If someone has done military service, they earn the title veteran and more. They earn our deep respect and admiration. Yet they are special, no one can ignore. They sacrifice the comforts we enjoy. The list is long of all the things they gave. Our veterans are extraordinary people. They are loyal, dedicated, true, and brave. When terror and invasion were real threats, they showed us that they could handle any storm. We owe our freedoms and our very lives to the veterans who served in uniform. Our veterans should be celebrities. They're exceptional. No other group compares. We're grateful for the many things they've done. They're always in our hearts and in our prayers. We owe our veterans support and friendship. Let no one ever question what they're worth. These men and women served us and our country, our veterans, the very best on earth.
Our guest speaker today is Mr. Joseph Evans.
First of all, I'd like to thank Principal Nelson, the staff, and the students of Lin-Wood for giving me this honor. And I'd also like to dedicate my remarks today to my longtime friend and fellow Marine, Lester Bradley. My name is Joe Evans. I am a Marine. As we say in the Marine Corps, once a Marine, always a Marine. In the month of November, I actually have 2 days that I celebrate. Today is the 239th birthday of the United States Marine Corps. On November 10th, 1775, the Continental Congress authorized the establishment of 2 battalions of Continental Marines to fight in the War for Independence. So as we say in the Corps, happy birthday, Marines. Who I am today and what I have done with my life is based in large part on my service in the United States Marine Corps in the late 1960s. Let me briefly tell you what I do today and then tell you what I did in the 60s. Today, I practice law in Alaska. I have practiced law in Alaska for 38 years. I am the city attorney for the city of Kotzebue, Alaska, an Inupiaq village of 3,200 people, 26 miles above the Arctic Circle. I'm also the city attorney for the village of Nuiqsut, an Inupiaq village of 400 people located on the north slope of Alaska in the oil fields. And lastly, I'm also the city attorney for the city of Pilot Point, Alaska, located on Bristol Bay. In 1996, I started college, but frankly, I was not ready for college, much to the chagrin of my mother sitting back there in the audience. I left college and joined the Marine Corps when I was 18. I went to boot camp at Parris Island, South Carolina, and infantry training at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. As all Marines know, all Marines are trained initially as riflemen or infantrymen, and then some of us go to school beyond that. I went to school to be a radio operator. From June of 1968 to July of 1969, I served as a radio operator in Vietnam, first in the infantry, the 2nd Battalion, 27th Marines, and then in an armored division, 1st Armored Amphibian Company, 11th Marines. Both of these units were with the 1st Marine Division. I had my 20th and 21st birthdays in Vietnam, and as an aside, when I went to Vietnam, I could not vote. The voting age was not raised until 1971. So as we said in Vietnam, old enough to fight, but not old enough to vote. 2.7 million Americans served in Vietnam. 2/3 of those were volunteers like myself. Nearly 10,000 women served in Vietnam. All of them were volunteers. 240 Vietnam veterans were awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. 270 received a Purple Heart for their wounds from combat. Of the 2.7 million Americans who served in Vietnam, less than 800,000 are estimated to be alive today by the Department of Defense. Due to the policies concerning rotation, more Marines were deployed for service in Vietnam than were deployed in World War II. Expression we had at the time when I was in Vietnam, I'm sure it was familiar to many veterans, is all gave some, but some gave all. After I returned from Vietnam, I finished my time in the Marine Corps at Camp Pendleton, California. I was then ready for college. I returned to college. I got my undergraduate degree at the University of Kentucky in 3 years and graduated Phi Beta Kappa. I then went to Duke Law School. I used the GI Bill for both college and law school. On Veterans Day, I like to remember, as President Kennedy said back in the early 60s, a nation reveals itself not only by the citizens it produces, but also by the citizens it honors and the citizens it remembers. And that's what we are remembering today as our veterans. I also remember the comment from former Vice President Dick Cheney, who said, "It is easy to take liberty for granted when you have never had it taken from you." I also remember the comments of the Argentine writer Jose Narseski, who said, "In war, there are no unwounded soldiers." And then Elmer Davis, who was a writer and a reporter during the Second World War, said, "This nation will remain the land of the free only so long as it is the home of the brave." And finally, as a father and grandfather, I also remember the remarks of Eva Merriam, who was an American poet back in the 1940s. And she said, "I dream of giving birth to a child who would one day ask her mother, 'What was war?'" The best definition that I've seen for a veteran is that from Gene Castanetti, who is the director of the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific in Honolulu, Hawaii. His definition goes as follows: a veteran is someone who wrote a blank check payable to the United States of America for an amount up to and including his or her life. The currency of freedom is the blood, sweat, and tears of a nation's people. On Veterans Day, I also like to read this poem, and it also defines what veterans have given our country. It is the veteran, not the preacher, who has given us freedom of religion. It is the veteran, not the reporter, who has given us freedom of the press. It is the veteran, not the poet, who has given us freedom of speech. It is the veteran, not the campus organizer, who has given us freedom to assemble. It is the veteran, not the lawyer, who has given us the right to a fair trial. It is the veteran, not the politician, who has given us the right to vote. In my 66 years in this life, I've been known by many names: student, law student, attorney, city attorney, and city councilman. I served on the city council in Anchorage, Alaska back in the 80s. However, I am the proudest of being called a son, a brother, a husband, a father, a grandfather, a Marine, and a veteran. The privilege and honor of being able to give 3.5 years of my life in service to my country truly humbles me. May God bless the United States, the great state of New Hampshire, and the town of Lincoln. And as we say in Inupiaq, thank you, Keku.
At this time, we're going to perform all of the marches of the Armed Forces. And I ask that any member who is in that armed force, when we get to their tune, please stand and be recognized. If you'd like, if you have a family member or a loved one who's also in that service, you may stand also. The order will be Marines, Army, Coast Guard, Air Force, and Navy.
I'd like to thank everyone for attending our annual Veterans Day Assembly. We appreciate the commitment and the efforts of all of the veterans who are in attendance, as well as those who have died and are no longer with us. The freedoms that we have today are largely due to the sacrifices from those who served in the armed services who helped lay the foundation for future generations. Thank you very much.
The Boy Scouts will now retire the colors. Please remain standing as Mrs. King announces our veterans as they leave.
Mr. Ronald Christensen.